500,000 migrants in all-time high, carrying several hundred migrants. Texas arrived outside Chicago. Follow severances. The migrants from Texas as to for action and local police to arrest migrants who illegally cross the border. Mayors in sanctuary cities are also pushing back on Texas officials.
It's clearly national, federal, that local governments are being asked to subsidize, and this is unsustainable.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham suggests the best solution is to ship large numbers of migrants back to their home country in an effort to discourage others from attempting to enter the United States.
We have 1.7 million people who are ready to be deported, but they just won't deport them. We need to send some people out of the country to stop the inflow. But Title 42 authority, in the hands of any administration willing to use it, would stop this.
This new year, immigration is expected to remain front and center, both in Congress and during the presidential race to the White House. In Washington, David Spike,
Biden don't want to close the border.
Before you call the repairman because your dryer quit working.
I want to get your thoughts. You've been studying and analyzing these, issues at the border, whether it's drugs, fentanyl. You're talking about marijuana now. What is the biggest issue facing our southern border?
Well, right now, the biggest issue is that the cartels have formed a relationship with the Chinese criminal networks, and they're operating with impunity at the southern border. There's an ongoing chemical bombing campaign on our country right out of China. I've watched this for so many years when I was the head of the Special Operations Division, going back to 2008, 2009. We started seeing K2 spice, bath salts coming out of the labs in China. Then they went to fentanyl. Then they started sending fentanyl directly to America. They started sending fentanyl directly to Mexico. Over years, they started just, sending massive quantities of chemicals to make fentanyl to Mexico. But now they're making more powerful synthetic opioids like nitazene, etonitazene, isonitazene, and they're also making xylazine, which is a horse tranquilizer that's causing necrosis, the rotting of human tissue. And Americans are dying all around the country at record levels. The administrator of DEA recently put out a safety alert to the entire country on xylazine, because it's something we've never seen in the history of this country, and it's coming out of China.
What do you think the intent is behind this?
My personal opinion is, I can't prove it in court, is that the Chinese Communist Party are trying to destabilize and destroy America under the disguise of the drug addiction. They know America is very addicted to drugs, and now with the marijuana, because we're so soft on marijuana, and they're now setting up marijuana grow operations all over this country. We've seen record amounts of Chinese-run marijuana grow operations. There was a report out of Maine recently. There was a leaked DHS memo. They identified 270 marijuana grow operations run by Chinese in Maine alone. We have them in Oklahoma, Colorado, Massachusetts, Oregon, California. They're all over the place. There's probably 1,000 or more, but you got to remember now, we have record amounts of Chinese nationals, mostly military-age men, coming across the border being apprehended illegally. They're setting up operations in our country. And by the way, they're doing all the money laundering pickups for the cartels. They're picking up millions of dollars all over the country. They're laundering the money back for the cartels to get paid. The leaders are getting paid faster and more efficiently than they've ever been paid. And the chemicals are coming like we've never seen.
I think the majority of the viewers might think, oh, marijuana, so what, big deal?
So marijuana is not the marijuana from the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. This is higher pure THC marijuana. I've talked to doctors about this. It's actually causing psychosis, schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety. So it's really a gateway drug for these kids that don't know any better, that are depressed, that are post-COVID. The mental illness, the depression, and anxiety is off the charts in America. So these kids are turning to drugs for help. So they start out with a little marijuana, then they take what they think is Oxy or Xanax or Percocet. It turns out to be fake pills from Mexico, and they're dying. And then the parents wonder, how did my kid die? I never even heard of fentanyl. So right now we're dealing with the worst crisis we've ever had. But the sad part is our president has said that international drug trafficking is a national security issue. So the question is, why then is he opening the border and allowing the cartels to operate with impunity? They're also running the largest human sex trafficking operation in the history of the country. They're running mass amounts of people across the border. They're getting paid thousands and thousands of dollars. They're running high-value targets. We have 1.8 million gotaways. We've never seen this in the history of America, but yet the public is not getting the details.
Derek, you're with an organization called Border 911. Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing, what you guys are seeing, specifically when it comes to the issue of this flow of illegal immigrants coming not just from Central and South America, but around the world.
So I'm very fortunate. I was asked to be part of Border 911. Tom Holman, former ICE director, is the CEO. Mark Morgan, former CBP commissioner, is on the board. Rodney Scott, the former chief of Border Patrol, is on the team. Sarah Carter from Fox News, Jason Jones from Newsmax, Victor Avalar, a former ICE agent who was ambushed with his partner, Jaime Zapata, in Mexico. So there's the team. But these guys helped President Trump write the policies to create the safest border in our lifetime. So now we're seeing historic amounts of illegals coming into the country. They've been invited in. They know they're getting freebies. They're having babies. They're getting cell phones. They're getting, Visa, prepaid cards. They're coming into whatever city they want, and they have their medical paid for, their schooling's paid for. It's absurd. We have massive American homeless all over the country. Many are homeless vets that are sleeping on the streets in our cities, and we're not taking care of them. The migrants, the illegal migrants, are getting taken care of better than our homeless in our country. The one thing I want to say, which I'm learning from my teammates here, that 90% of these asylum claims are fraudulent. So they come to America under this fraudulent claim of asylum. They never show up for the hearing. The hearings now are backed up 3, 4, 5 years. And that's another thing that's very sad. The public doesn't know that. Border 911, we're trying to educate the public on the facts. This is not a red or a blue issue. It's a red, white, and blue issue. Every American needs to care about what's going on the border, because without border security, we'll have no country. We have now migrants from over 175, 180 countries coming into this country. This is not just poor people from Central America and Mexico. And by the way, I have a big heart for these poor people. My heart goes out for them with their families. But because you're poor and you want a better life does not entitle you to get here on an asylum claim, okay? That's not good enough. So you have to wait in line, okay? America's a great country, but right now it's being destroyed by unknowns all over our country. So every American has to be aware of that.
For so many years,
woman, she started with nothing. When you read the book, you'll see that she was born in a one-room hut, and it's still there today. Sadly, it doesn't belong to my family, but maybe we can buy it back again. But I'm very proud of it. It's got boards of all shapes and sizes, and to the building, the structure. And I say to myself, this is a reminder of where I've come from. And, we can't afford to get too big in our britches, because, as she would have said to me, the same people you meet on the way up are the same ones you're going to meet on the way down. So you treat everyone with respect. So, yeah, she was a one-woman force. But then she's my paternal grandmother, but so was my mother's mother. Grandparents I think maybe because they have more time for you as a grandchild, you learn a lot.
One of the most, traumatic parts of your book is actually you figuring out how to deal with your daughter, Dijon.
Uh-huh.
And then, tragic events that followed.
Mm-hmm.
And so dealing with mental illness in
Yeah.
the family, tell me about that. Yeah.
Yeah, she's growing up, and you're thinking maybe she's just rebellious because she's not doing what we would say the normal things, and you just don't think that it could be a mental disease, and nobody wants to talk about mental issues, and so you're not recognizing the signs, and when it's happening during the teenage years, you think it's a rebellious teenager. But then she had that real break in college, and we had to go and get her, and then finally, and because she was an adult by that time, the doctors aren't telling you everything, and so she stopped taking her medication, and but the doctors did tell us that sometimes mental illness is a place where they come back into themselves, the chemicals, because she had a chemical imbalance. And she's working again, she's been productive again. And because of that, she assumes that she's fine, she doesn't need her medicine. And it's a roller coaster. She doesn't take her medication, she goes right back off of it. And it's this cycle. It's like a 7-month cycle. But you learn to recognize the sign. And by the time I did, it was, cycle number whatever, but it was too late. She seemed to be on the right foot that, no, you have to keep taking your medication. We even had to watch her. Stick out your tongue, et cetera, as an adult. So we just thought she was back on the right track, but she clearly wasn't.
You had a premonition, actually, of sorts. And the day or the few days were...
Actually, it started with my granddaughter, Faith, because a month before they went to heaven, Faith would say, "Grandma, Jesus is giving us a big house, a really big house," and I would just wonder, what is she talking about? And then she started drawing big houses, in the childlike way that she did, and then one night, because my daughter would drop them off and we would go to Bible study. One night I heard her praying and she said, "Thank you, Jesus, for the big house you're going to give us." And that's when I thought, okay, something's going on. I'm going to ask my daughter, is she moving? Well, the next day she came to pick them up and I asked, are you guys going somewhere? Because Faith keeps talking about you're going into a big house. And she said, "I don't know what she's talking about, Mom. We're not moving." But now I understand. The child was trying to say mansion. And the Bible, Jesus promises a mansion. But she didn't know the word, so she was saying big house. Well, the day before they went to heaven, my daughter, again, came to pick them up. And she bent down and she looked at me and I just saw a skull. The skeletal skull in her face. And I said, she stopped taking her medication. I've got to talk to her about that. But I'll do it next week because I don't want a war, because that was always inevitably what happened. Well, Faith, once again, she came and sat on this hip and she asked a question of me, but I cannot tell you to this day what the question was, because I heard a voice fill the room and ask, "What are you going to do if she dies?" I was sort of jarring. And I looked to see if my other daughter had heard the voice, but she hadn't. My other granddaughter, they hadn't. My husband was in the kitchen, nobody. I was the only one who heard it. So I thought, And Faith jumped off my hip, came around, looked me in the face and said, "Grandma," because it was obvious I was not here, And so yes, and then I just studied the curvature of her nose. I studied her whole face. I just studied her because the voice had asked, "What are you going to do if she dies?" And the next day, they were going on home.
Well, I'm very sorry for your loss. I know this was, some years ago, of course, but it was incredibly evocative how you explained this, and also how it, I guess, influenced you in your thinking and what you learned from it.
Yeah.
And that's actually a big theme. And it seems your writing or in your life that
trauma just seems to be it's a clear and definitive point. And what do you do now? Are you going to disintegrate? Are you yourself going to lose your mind? Are you just going to exist until you die? That happened with my grandmother when she died when I was 18 and I was supposed to start college. that August, but when she died that July, I thought my life was over and I'm just going to die. I'm just going to die. Here I was 18 and I was so traumatized that the Marine Corps saved me when I joined. And yeah, the few, the proud, and I thought, that's what I need, discipline. And then here it is again, another traumatic death. And what do? Well, I have 2 remaining children, my husband and I. You can't fall apart. They need you too. And so you find a reason to get up every morning after you collapse, of course, because there are 3 caskets in front of you. What are you going to do? How do you go to the field with 3? Not 1, not 2, but 3.
Yeah,
you have to find a way.
You lost your two granddaughters.
My daughter and the 2 grandchildren. So, and I don't say lost because I know where they are. They're in heaven. They're where I want to be, and that is very comforting because they're not subject to the vagaries of life anymore, the insults and all that. So they're fine. They're just fine.
Well, okay. So speaking of insults, let's work on that for a moment. I mean, the term not black enough comes up a lot.
That, and it's happened, especially during my first run for election for office, and just because I'm a Republican and I'm black. And I guess I'm supposed to be a Democrat if I'm black. And, this is America. Nobody tells us, what we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to be, and et cetera, et cetera. We make those decisions for ourselves. But for some people, it's all about political power. And if you can keep all of us, in the one basket, then we need you as our political savior. I don't need a savior.
Yep.
I already have that. I need you, the government, to get out of my way, so that I can accomplish. This is America. My dad came to America with $1.75, and just to picture it, 7 quarters. 7 quarters. And yet, he succeeded, and he is comfortably retired now.
Well, and at a time when there was, actually some pretty serious barriers for him.
Yes,
right?
He came.
More than now with
1963,
yeah.
17 days before Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech. Think about that. He, as a black man, having read and being told what to expect in America, begged to come to America. Begged, thought this was where he could restart his life. And then he brought me. And you know who else knows that? America is the place to be? The people at the southern border. They're throwing their children literally over the fence to plant them in American soil. Now, I say you have to do it the right way. We have to know who's entering the country. We have to know everything about you. We have to give you permission. But they believe that if they get their foot on American soil, the trajectory, the opportunities, everything will be for the better. They're not believing about, racist, sexist, whatever. They don't believe that.
Well, and I might add, despite all the huge problems that, I'm seeing and many Americans are seeing, they're actually right about that, I would say.
Yeah.
Right?
They want America to stay America. They want the America they hear about where opportunities abound, where if you work hard, you can make it, where you can really, literally decide your own future, where you're free. You're free even to fail. I mean, what government do you know that puts in their constitution happiness? The pursuit of the government is interested in you pursuing happiness? Now, that wasn't always true. Of course, we know that. But we are not there anymore. And I am proof that I was elected under the same constitution that existed way back then. And not only that, but here I am, second in command in the former capital of the Confederate States. Don't tell me America hasn't changed. Of course it has. Now, are there problems? Of course. There are problems in other countries. There is no utopia. But America is the best we've got, and we're going to keep her.
And we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back. During COVID starting in 2020 with all these shelter-in-place lockdown policies, all sorts of policies, what a bizarre monetary policy and so forth. Your business actually suffered quite a bit. I mean, I didn't quite remember if that was it for it or you wrote it out in the end. But what's your view on what happened during that time?
Well, you see that apparently there was a lot of overreach. There was a lot of stepping on toes and stepping on the Constitution. That shouldn't have happened. If you wanted to keep your job, you were forced to get a vaccine. You had waitresses, waiters asking you for your vaccination status. Are you kidding me? You had houses of worship closed, businesses shut down. We will tell you. You had big box stores open, but mom and pop stores were closed because of government policies. COVID didn't shut us down. Government policy on COVID shut us down because Florida didn't shut down in the way that, for example, Virginia did. Our schools were closed. The public schools were closed. But yet, private schools were open 5 days a week for a whole year. But the public schools were closed. What? COVID doesn't go to private schools? None of this made any sense. We had in Virginia, for example, the ABC stores, a liquor store, state-run. That one was open. But other stores were shut down. Why? Did they need spirits or something? So, yeah, there was a spirit in the air, right, and infected my business. I remember that the governor then, Northup, declared that you had to have permission to be out in case the sheriff stopped you. What country is this, you see? So we had South Dakota didn't shut down in the way that we did. And so everybody flocked to these free states, as they were being called. Even the Democrat, I saw AOC in Florida without a mask. But when she went back to what are you doing there? Governor Pritzker from Illinois locked his state down, but sent his wife and children to Florida, where everybody was free to do as they wished. So they're all hypocrites. Governor Newsom in California was hobnobbing and having a wonderful time with so many thousands of plates of dinner with donors, maskless. Speaker Pelosi was in California, in San Francisco, going from getting her hair done without a mask. Fauci without a mask until the camera caught them. So none of this made any sense. But the people, I think, they're slowly waking up.
Well, so one of the, themes that comes out in your autobiography is, dealing with fear. Right?
Yes.
You're dealing with fear constructively. But here's the connection. During this time, I think, we could call it industrial grade propaganda to sow fear was employed at an unprecedented scale, at least to my knowledge, with all these the newest technologies, and enabled through social media. And it turns out it's very difficult for people to deal with that and to even see it for what it is.
Yeah,
right?
Probably because we're not used to it. I'm from a third world country. I've seen propaganda. I knew the word propaganda when I was 8 years old. I knew about what that meant because we were taken over by a socialist Democrat, is what he called himself, and that's what AOC and her ilk called themselves. And we're going to do this the right way, and it destroyed Jamaica, destroyed our economy, brought Castro over from Cuba. Cuba's only 45 miles from Jamaica. Now, Jamaica and Cuba have always had a good relationship. My grandfather worked at Guantanamo Bay way back then. But by then we were communists, and they brought that Russian money over, started building schools, etc., destroyed Jamaica's economy, nationalized everything. I remember you couldn't buy the chicken unless you bought something else that went with the chicken. We had supply issues. It was bad. And multinational corporations who were doing so well in Jamaica and providing so many jobs up and left because they understood their profits were no longer theirs. You know, these communists, these socialists, one day they'll figure it out. Probably, we learn from history, we never learn from history, so maybe we won't ever learn that communism doesn't work, socialism is no good.
Well, so how does that relate to what you see or seeing happening in this country now, I guess?
Yeah, it sounds really good that, you know, we're all going to share and share alike, and except that in our work environments, at our jobs, you know that you work harder than your coworker. Do you want to share the bonus that you get with your coworker who didn't do half of the work that you did? Because that's what communism says. We're all going to share. There is no merit in working hard. No, none of that makes any sense. If you work hard, you should get the reward. That sounds fair to anyone. I'm reminded of the classic teacher situation, teacher in the school where he asked the class, all right, well, if you get an A, are you going to share your A with your classmate who got a D? Yeah, nobody wants that, do they? So let's just be real about how things really work in the real world. One of the things that we hear communists or whoever, socialists, say is, well, if you read the Bible, which apparently they pick and choose the scriptures that they want, it's, well, Jesus said that you're supposed to share everything together, and that's one of the verses that talks about that. Except they forget, when Jesus talks to the rich young ruler, he doesn't say, give everything away. He says, sell everything you have and then come follow me. Sell. He doesn't say, give it. He says, sell it. So, there you are.
No, that's a interesting distinction that I've never heard about. Any final thoughts as we finish?
Just one thing. In everything that we've already discussed, that it is your life. It's the one life you have. Live it to the fullest. Help others as you're born. It's fear. Fear will always be with us. The fear of man. I read the Bible, for example, and I see great men being in fear, like David. David the giant slayer. David who slayed lions and bears as a boy was afraid of a man, a political leader. Feared for his life. So it's a common to all of us. If you're going to do something, do it afraid. Courage, I was once reading, is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing it even as you are afraid. So you take those shaking knees of yours and you go do it. If you've got to challenge the boss, you've got to challenge the boss. Now, the reason why you're afraid is because there are consequences. You could lose your job. You could lose your life. But so many people got ahead of that fear. And yes, they suffered. Created America. Benjamin Franklin said to his fellow patriots in the war against the British Revolutionary War, gentlemen, either we hang together or we will surely hang separately. And in fact, some of them did hang, and those who didn't lost everything. So, it is what it is.
Who lost everything but gained something.
Yeah.
Very, very valuable to many
lost
people.
Family. Yeah,
Right.
Lost family, lost estates, lost everything. But here we sit. It's life.
Now you have a few outlets like us and Fox News and maybe a few more that are shining that light. They're getting drone footage. They're seeing this. But one thing that a lot of people still might not understand is the amount of people coming from the Middle East, China, and other countries across the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean.
Right, great point. And you're right. The videos on social media are the best way to learn because you're not going to get this on mainstream media. So anybody that has any doubt, just go watch some of the social media videos that are being filmed every day. But let's just look at China for an example. In 2021, there were 342 Chinese nationals apprehended illegally by Border Patrol on the southern border. In 23, there was 24,125. That's over a 7,000 or 7,000% increase. There's thousands already been apprehended in October of this year. So there's people from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Russia, from everywhere in Africa, from Yemen. We have no idea who's coming into this country. That's the sad part. There's so many unknowns. And let's not even talk about the northern border. Remember, the 19 hijackers that came in and took down those towers and hit the Pentagon and crashed in Pennsylvania, they came from over the northern border. So we don't have resources on the northern border. And another thing I want to tell you, and I talk to law enforcement every day of the week, the morale couldn't be any lower. And retirements are skyrocketing. So we're losing quality people in government. The morale is rock bottom because they can't do their job. Like Border Patrol didn't sign up. These people didn't sign up to do babysitting and administrative paperwork all day. They signed up to go on the front lines and protect America. They can't do that because they're getting overloaded by the illegal migrants.
What does low morale translate into?
No security. You can't do the job. Right now, law enforcement is losing resources at record levels. They're losing the tools to go after the bad guys at record levels. All these big tech companies, they're now encrypting all their communications, which means law enforcement is in the dark. If law enforcement's in the dark and they don't have anybody left to investigate, guess what that means for every American? We're all at risk. Our kids, our grandkids, our nephews, our nieces, the future generation. And by the way, on that note, did you know that the military is losing record amounts of young men and women from fentanyl poisoning? Did you know that? Because it's really underreported.
So it's no longer military aged, it's military.
Military members are dying in our own military because they're using fentanyl, because the morale in the military is at rock bottom as well. They're learning about diversity, equity, inclusion instead of going after the targets that are looking to destroy our country forever.
Derek Maltz, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.